I was 17 the first time I realized how fragile dreams could be. Our house was filled with tension most evenings. My mother worked 2 jobs, one at a local grocery store during the day, and another as a waitress in a small diner at night. My father had left when I was 10, and though I pretended I no longer cared, there was an empty ache that seemed to widen each year. We lived in a modest neighborhood, the kind where everyone's windows opened into everyone else's lives. The walls of our apartment carried voices, arguments, laughter, crying babies, the sound of televisions left on too late. Sometimes, I envied people in the glossy magazines I read secretly in the library. They lived in large houses with smiling families. They had futures that seemed paved with certainty. I had none of that. School wasn't much of a refuge either. My grades were slipping, not because I wasn't capable, but because I felt as though no path led anywhere worth going. Every dream I dared to imagine, a scholarship, traveling, becoming a writer, collapsed under the weight of reality. How could I dream of writing books when I could barely afford notebooks? Then, one evening, my mother's friend arrived. The unexpected visitor. Her name was Clara. I'd met her only once or twice in passing when I was younger, but she had moved away years ago. That night, she appeared in our apartment as if she had stepped out of a different world. She was elegant without being ostentatious, with eyes that held both warmth and secrets. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had faced life's storms and learned how to dance in the rain. When she hugged my mother, I saw the lines of exhaustion on Mom's face soften. They spoke in hushed tones at first, catching up, sharing memories of their youth. I tried to retreat into my room, not wanting to intrude, but Clara called my name. "Stay," she said with a smile. "I want to see how much you've grown." I sat across from her, awkward in my oversized sweatshirt. Clara's gaze lingered on me, not in judgment, but with a kind of gentle curiosity, as though she could see past the surface into the knots of confusion I carried. "You've got her eyes," Clara said, nodding toward my mother. "And maybe her stubbornness too." We all laughed, though a little uneasily. Later that night, when my mother went into the kitchen to make tea, Clara leaned closer. Her perfume smelled faintly of jasmine and something earthy, grounding. She studied me for a moment, then smiled in a way that felt strangely knowing. Then she whispered, the phrase, "You are not your circumstances." That was it. Just 5 words. Yet, they landed in me like sparks on dry grass. At first, I didn't fully understand. I nodded politely, forcing a smile, but inside I thought, of course I'm my circumstances. How could I not be? Every decision I made was dictated by what we could afford, what people expected of me, the limitations stamped into my life. But Clara's eyes didn't waver. She said it again, softer this time. "You are not your circumstances. Remember that." My mother returned, and the moment dissolved. But those words lingered like a song I couldn't stop hearing. Seeds of change. That night I lay awake in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The phrase repeated itself in my head, colliding with every insecurity, every excuse, every fear I had. If I wasn't my circumstances, then what was I? Could I be something more than the daughter of a tired waitress, the girl with second-hand clothes the student teachers had stopped expecting much from? Could I step outside the small world that seemed to cage me? I didn't have answers, but something inside me shifted. A small flame flickered, fragile but alive. The next morning, I went to school differently. I didn't magically ace every test or suddenly become confident, but I carried Clara's phrase like an invisible shield. When a teacher sighed at my incomplete homework, I didn't shrink as much. When kids laughed at my worn-out shoes, I told myself, this isn't me. This isn't all of me. It wasn't a transformation, it was a beginning. The first leap. A few weeks later, I saw a flyer for a short story contest posted on the library board. Normally, I would have walked past it. Who was I to think I could win anything? But the phrase whispered back to me. You are not your circumstances. I tore the flyer down and carried it home. For days, I scribbled in secret, pouring into the story every piece of myself I usually hid. My loneliness, my hope, my anger, my love for words. The story wasn't polished, but it was honest. When I submitted it, my hands trembled. A month later, I got the email. I had won second place. It wasn't first, but it was something. It was proof. For the first time, I felt as though the world had cracked open a little, showing me a glimpse of another path. Clara returns. Clara visited us again a few months later. By then, I had started keeping a notebook filled with stories and reflections. I showed it to her shyly, expecting polite encouragement at best. Instead, she read silently for a long time, then looked at me with that same knowing smile. "You've got a voice," she said. "And voices like yours, they matter." She told me about her own past, how she had grown up in poverty, how she had nearly abandoned her dreams. She confessed that someone had once whispered something similar to her, years ago, when she felt lost. "And I believed it," she said. "That's why I'm here now. Passing it on." Her words weren't just advice, they were a torch being handed to me. The road ahead. Believing I was not my circumstances didn't erase struggles. There were still nights I cried over bills, mornings I went to school hungry, days when despair threatened to drag me under. But the difference was this: I no longer believed those moments defined me. I applied for scholarships with trembling hands. Some rejected me, but others didn't. I found teachers willing to mentor me when they saw I was trying. I started working part-time, saving every dollar I could for college applications. The world didn't suddenly become easy. But I stopped seeing it as a prison. I began to see it as a mountain, steep, dangerous, but climbable. Years later. I am writing this now from a small but sunlit apartment miles away from the neighborhood where I grew up. I am 25, a graduate, and a writer with stories published in magazines I once thought were untouchable. My mother still works hard, though she finally allowed herself to rest more. And Clara, she's still part of our lives, her visits always carrying the same warmth and quiet wisdom. Sometimes I wonder, what if she hadn't whispered those words? What if she had kept silent, or if I had dismissed them? But she did, and I didn't. 5 words changed the trajectory of my life. Not because they erased hardship, but because they gave me permission to believe I was more than the sum of my struggles. Reflection. Now, when I meet younger people who remind me of myself, tired, doubtful, burdened by circumstances, I smile. And sometimes, when the moment feels right, I lean closer and whisper the phrase that changed everything for me. You are not your circumstances. And I hope, just as Clara hoped with me, that the words will take root in their hearts, and spark a destiny they never thought possible.